Okay, so what we have been doing so far, we know already, right? We have three APIs which we uh, are creating for our Doctor Everywhere application, right? So we have Appointments API, we have Doctor API, we have Patient API, and we kind of are creating these as backend services for the front end. So front end is we are developing in React, and from React, it will be connected to the backend, that is these services, and in turn, these services are going to interact with the database. Right, so this is the overall flow which we are trying to create. These we are also calling as microservices. So these are our microservices, separate microservices doing separate things. So patient API is doing the patient related things. Doctor API is doing the doctor API, doctor related things, creation of doctor, updation of doctor, appointment API is for booking the appointment, right? What is missing right now is the front end. So front end is something which is being developed separately, but I went ahead and created my own front end so that I could showcase how these APIs are actually integrated with the front end. So, but in my case, I haven't made use of React. I have created an application in Vue. Vue.js is another framework, the top three framework for creating single page application. One is Angular, second is React, and third is Vue. So there are three ways you can create a front end application using these top JS frameworks. So I know you guys are working on React, but I took the privilege to develop this small, very basic front end application in Vue.js. The connection. So I will not talk about the Vue in general here. I will only talk about how I connected and how the application looks like when it tried to interact with the backend services. So that was the goal. So I have written this in Vue UI Vue.js, and only thing to notice is I have created different pages inside, different components, very similar to React. And here, if I go inside, I am simply using Axios, the same thing which you use in React. I'm also using the same thing. So code for that almost remains the same. So I'm using Axios library to create appointment. And then from here, I'm simply saying axios.post, and then it will create the appointment with all the relevant data. So the logic is still remain the same as if React, but you will not be developing a Vue.js application. You will still be developing the React, and later we will connect this to React also. But for now, what we have is a Vue.js application. So let me show you how this looks like. If I go to terminal and start my application, and I simply say npm run dev, this will start my application on here on 3000, and this is the basic application which I have. Now if I go here, it is a home page. There's nothing here. If I go to get appointments, I get a list. I get a button to get list of all the appointments which I have. Then I go to create appointments. It gives me a mechanism to create an appointment. Then I go to get doctors. Again, I can get things, create. I can create doctor, patient. I can get patient, create. I can create patient. Let's see how this works. If I go to uh, create appointments here, click on create appointment. Let's see if it did create it. If I go to inspect, I go to network, and if I do it again, uh, let me quickly do this. Okay, I'm getting some error which is post localhost 8081 appointment, because it is trying to reach to this URL which is not there. Why? Because I haven't started my backend services. Right, so I have to start my backend services. So I'll go and start them now. So far, if you remember, we are always playing around with the Swagger UI, but now we are trying to integrate our front end with the backend. Okay, so that is basically what we are trying to do. So if I run this again, run, and I run this also. So I'm trying to run all the application now, run, and I will run this also. Right now I'm running this on local machine. So I'll run this also from here. So I have all three APIs are up and running now. If I go here, click on get list of appointments, and I am getting a list of appointments. Okay. If I go do get the list of doctors, I will get all the list of doctors. Now, from where these are coming? These are coming from the backend database. Where is my backend database? It is here. Okay, so I have these three layer architecture at the moment, right? I have a front end. This is my front end. This is written in Vue.js. For you, it will be written in React. You will be writing this in React. Connecting still remains the same. Connecting the front end with the back end still remains the same, and you will use Axios library to integrate with the or to hit the backend API and get the results and show it in the UI. But for hitting it, you will still use the Axios. Okay, that is what also I am also using with the Vue.js. Okay, second is once you hit that API, specific API, for in this case you are hitting the backend doctors API. When you clicking here, it is going to the MongoDB Atlas Cloud here to this URL MongoDB Atlas Cloud, and from here it is fetching the results. So now our database, as we discussed last time, is also on the cloud. It is no longer, we are no longer using S2 database, we are using a MongoDB database which is on the cloud. So whatever it is here, API is going here, querying these results, giving it back to the front end, this, and then front end is showing that information here. Okay, so you see three layers now. We have a front end. This is a front end. On the click of this button, if I show you inspect, I go to network, and here you can also see when I say get list of doctors, it is saying it is hitting this API which is hosted on localhost, and that is trying to get. It is trying to get the results. Response has been returned, and in the response you can see what has been returned. So in the response, the API has returned the whole JSON array. And this JSON array is then manipulated by the front end to so that it could be displayed in a user-friendly way, like this in a table format, HTML table format. So this is the architecture we have been trying to create since quite long, right? So we spent 3 months, 4 months to reach to this state where we have a front end, where we have a backend, where we have a database. You do something in the front end, you call the backend services call that database return the result, API processes it, compiles it, sends it back to the front end, and front end then shows it to you in a format which is human readable, that is an HTML format. Okay. Um, now again I'm repeating, don't get confused with the front end. Front end you will still be using the React. I am actually not very sure where you guys are at the moment with React. Have you guys created the project or not created the project so far? I'm not very sure of that. So eventually the integration part will be covered by Suhas. Suhas will be covering the how the APIs will be interacting with his React app, which you guys are also creating. Eventually that will be the eventuality, but for now I have just to showcase how the front end, back end, and database are connected together. That's the reason I created this in Vue.js here. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. Fine, sure. So I'll move forward now. The next step, and rather before the next step, let me show you something, or maybe I'll do that later. Let's go with the flow. So now for now, if you see, everything is actually running on your local machine, right? So this is the UI which is running on the local machine. These are the API which is running in the local machine, right? API is also running in the local machine, and all the other things, which is database. Actually, database running on the cloud, which is good. So I have placed database on the cloud already, but my front end as well as my back end is running on my local machine, which I don't really want because I want to provide this to the people who can actually make use of this, right? So I need to do something wherein I could deploy this somewhere, right? So I need to deploy it. But for now, I don't have anything to deploy, right? Because to deploy something, it has to be on a server, right? एक server की जरूरत है आपको अगर आपको deploy करना है तो. Right now, when you develop something on local machine, you develop it locally, right? You develop it locally and you try things, and then your local host becomes when you say local host, this local host becomes a server, local server, and then it gives you a port, and on port you try to run things, test things, etc., etc. But how can these applications be accessed by someone else, which is on the internet. How I can make it available on the internet so that my actual clients and customers can use my application. So to do that, what we are going to learn today is quite different. We're going to learn today something called as deployment on a server. So how you will deploy something on the server so that it becomes accessible over internet. But in order to do that, you need to have a server. So you need to buy a server, right? And server doesn't come cheap. Server costs some money. Okay. But what we will do today is, instead of going and buying a server, etc. Server in the sense an hardcore server machine, actual bare metal machine which you will buy, bring it at home and keep it and then connect it with the network. That is what server is, right? But we don't want it. So what we will do is we will host our application on cloud, because that's the advantage of cloud. That is, the cloud provides you series of different machines with different configurations in terms of CPU and memories, and then you can buy it from cloud. You buy it in the cloud, you use it, and then you don't need it, you just return it back. So that's the advantage of cloud. So what I'm going to do is I will use the cloud infrastructure to deploy my application onto the AWS platform. So what we'll see today is something related to AWS. I will not go into deeper into explaining what AWS is and how this works. All I will show is how to start with and how to run your application in AWS using something called as Elastic Beanstalk. Okay, and that I will show you in a series of steps which you can take. Okay, now, and of course, I will only focus on the API side of things. So I will not deploy the UI. UI is in Vue.js. I will only show you how to deploy uh, your your three APIs separately so that this can be accessed from anywhere. And anywhere means you can access it over browser, and you can also access it from your application, that is from your Vue.js application or React application running anywhere. Okay, so let's get started. For doing this, what you need first is you need to have an AWS account. Okay, now to create an AWS account, it's not that difficult. Go to AWS login. Okay, you go to AWS here, and then you go click on create an AWS account. Okay, so when you create an AWS account, it will ask you for a few details about this and that, etc., etc. But the most important part here is, which you definitely need, is a credit card. Because when you create an AWS account, it will not let you create it without you putting in an credit card details here. It will not deduct any amount from there. So in AWS, you have two models. One is free tier models, wherein you can use the service of AWS free as long as you are using the low configuration machines. अगर आप machines को high CPU, high RAM वाला machine ले लोगे, तो it will cost you. Otherwise, otherwise you can only keep it simple, and you can only use free tier, only use free tier account, free tier machines, free tier configuration machines. Okay. So I will not show you how to create an account. It's pretty straightforward, but only caveat here is that you need to provide your credit card details. If you don't have credit card, then you will not be able to use AWS. As simple as that. Okay, so I will recommend, if you want to deploy this on a server, create an AWS account and try to put a credit card information there. Rest assured, if you put credit card there, it's not like it will deduct any money from it, as long as you keep your configuration towards the free tier model. तो कुछ ज़्यादा एक्सपेरिमेंट्स नहीं करना है वहाँ पे. सिंपल जैसे मैं बता रहा हूँ वैसा करोगे तो it will not cost you money, and you will just, after you do this, test it, experiment with it, and you can just go and delete it. और जाके अपने जो भी कॉन्फ़िगरेशन मशीन है उसको डिलीट कर दो, and then it's all okay. कुछ पैसा वगैरह नहीं कटेगा. You can even delete your AWS account later. Fine. So the reason I'm showing you this is so that you know how to deploy an application, and deployment can happen in many ways. There are different deployment techniques, infrastructure, and different cloud networks, and different ways deployment can happen, different kind of servers you can have. But AWS, using AWS is the easiest to see how to deploy it. So you don't have to deploy and run it continuously. You have to just try it. ट्राई करना है आपको एक बार डिप्लॉयमेंट कैसे होता है वगैरह वगैरह उस चीज के लिए. ओके. So I will just continue now. So AWS is what I'm going to use to deploy my application. Once you have created the account, provided the credit card details, your account will be activated. Once it's activated, you have to go here and you have to go to here. You have to search for Elastic Beanstalk. Now, Elastic Beanstalk is a way by which you can very quickly deploy an application. Okay, deploying an application is not straightforward because the basic unit in AWS is EC2. EC2 means a virtual servers in the cloud. So from here, from your EC2, you come here and you create a launch instance. When you create a launch instance, यहाँ पे आप डिटेल्स देते हो कि मुझे कितनी बड़ी मशीन चाहिए, उसका सीपीयू कितना होना चाहिए, 1 सीपीयू, 1 गीगाबाइट मेमोरी, ये सब आपको करना पड़ेगा. फिर ये करने के बाद आप इसमें एप्लीकेशंस वगैरह इंस्टॉल करोगे, सर्वर इंस्टॉल करोगे और टॉमकैट अपाचे वगैरह इंस्टॉल करोगे, जो कि प्रॉब्लमेटिक है. और भी चीज़ें करनी होती हैं. इट्स नॉट स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड फ्रॉम हियर. ओके, विच इज़ अ क्यूम्बरसम प्रोसेस. थोड़ा टाइम लगता है समझने में, एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. सो हम ये प्रोसेस के थ्रू नहीं जाएंगे. ओके, वी विल नॉट डू EC2 वे फॉर डिप्लॉयमेंट. हम एक इजी तरीका ढूंढ रहे हैं. विद द इजी तरीका इन AWS इज इलास्टिक बीनस्टॉक. सो वी आर नॉट गोइंग थ्रू बाइंग अ सर्वर, बिकॉज देखो कोई भी एप्लीकेशन होता है वो सर्वर पे रन होता है, राइट? एनी एप्लीकेशन विच रन्स ऑन अ सर्वर इन AWS represented by EC2. But if I go with this route, I will have to install lot of things. I have to configure a lot of things. I want to avoid doing that. And that's the reason I will use another service in AWS, which is Elastic Beanstalk. ठीक है? So हम Elastic Beanstalk को try करेंगे. When I go to Elastic Beanstalk, I'll come here. Okay, I already have few APIs up and running here, but I will show you how you go and create your first application. So you go here, click on applications. Okay, and from here, as simple as that, you have to start with the create application. Okay. Now, before I even do anything with the AWS, I need to have the application which I want to deploy, right? उसके लिए मुझे क्या करना पड़ेगा? मैं यहाँ पे आऊँगा. Let me close all of these, stop all. Okay. And you remember there is a command called as maven clean install, right? So when I say maven clean install, it creates a build. Okay, it creates my build. Now, अभी तक हम क्या कर रहे थे? अभी तक हम सोर्स में जाते थे and we used to go to main. यहाँ से हम मेन पे जाके अपॉइंटमेंट ऐप पे क्लिक करके रन कर देते थे, right? This is what we were doing so far, which is how you run the application locally. But अब हम ऐसा नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि हमें रन नहीं करना है, हमें डिप्लॉय करना है. और जब हम सर्वर पे डिप्लॉय करेंगे वहां पे वो एप्लीकेशन रन होगा ऑटोमेटिकली. दिस इज व्हाट वी वांट, राइट? सो कोई भी स्प्रिंग बूट एप्लीकेशन होता है, उसको अगर मुझे कहीं पे डिप्लॉय करना है तो पहले मुझे उसका आर्टिफैक्ट क्रिएट करना पड़ता है, राइट? हाउ विल आई क्रिएट आर्टिफैक्ट? इफ यू रिमेंबर, हम लोग अभी तक क्या कर रहे थे? वी वर लर्निंग डॉकर, राइट? सो हम लोग डॉकर के थ्रू एप्लीकेशन को बिल्ड करते थे और फिर डॉकर को पुश करते थे और डॉकर के एक प्लेटफॉर्म पे रन करते थे. For now, we are not doing that. So we are not doing the Docker deployment at the moment. Okay? Docker deployment on AWS is more complicated. So I don't want you guys to be worried about doing more complicated things on AWS when you are not done the simple thing. Okay? So we are not going towards Docker deployment. हमने Docker सीखा so that we could learn how to use a Docker file. Okay, how to use a Docker file, the different Docker files available here, right? So how to use these Docker files to create the Docker image, and then we pushed it back to the Docker registry. Okay, and we use something called as GitLab. If you remember, हमारे पास GitLab की files थी, something like this, and we use GitLab file to build our Docker image and push our Docker image to Docker Hub, right? And from Docker Hub, I could pull it to a platform to deploy. That is called as Docker deployment. That runs on something called as Kubernetes. But हम वहाँ नहीं जा रहे हैं. Okay, so I am repeating this again and again so that you don't get confused कि अभी तो हम Docker कर रहे थे, अब हम ये क्या कर रहे हैं. Okay, डॉकर हम कर रहे थे क्योंकि इवेंचुअली हम डॉकर पे ही रन करेंगे, हमारी एप्लीकेशन माइक्रो सर्विस एप्लीकेशन है बिल्ट यूजिंग डॉकर टेक्नोलॉजी, and we were supposed to do that, but we are not doing that because that is further complicated. So we don't want to learn a Docker deployment on AWS at the moment. Okay, so we will learn keep things simple, and हम simple deployment करेंगे, and simple deployment हम कर सकते हैं using what? Using a jar file. So अगर आप आपका डॉकर फाइल भी देखोगे, इफ यू गो टू डॉकर फाइल, यहाँ पर भी हम क्या कर रहे थे, यहाँ पर भी हम जार ही बेसिकली अपने मेरे कंटेनर के अंदर रन कर रहे थे. So we were running a jar inside the container, right? And we are doing here what? We are doing here Maven clean package, and this was creating a jar, and that jar I was copying into the image, and then I was running it inside the container. But अब हम container पे नहीं जा रहे हैं, अब हम simple way जा रहे हैं, jar way. So what we will do is, instead of doing anything to do with Docker, we'll simply say Maven clean install -d skip tests. So अभी मैं टेस्ट रन नहीं कर रहा हूँ, I'm just, oops, what happened? Okay, let me come out of uh, the folder, and when I run this command, it will go ahead and create 3 builds for me. Okay, where are these builds created? These will be created inside. This will be created inside my target folder. So यहाँ पे मेरी target folder में app.jar create होगी, and तीनों में होगी, appointment की भी होगी. It will go and create in the appointment also. It will go and create in the target folder of doctor service also, and it will also create it in the patient. Patient वाले में भी यही create होगा app.jar. And actually Docker में भी हम यही कर रहे थे, nothing different. App.jar create कर this, when someone run this command, it will create an app.jar, और app.jar को we will copying and pasting here and running it. Okay, so app.jar के अंदर मेरा एप्लीकेशन है, my application is inside app.jar. अगर मुझे ऐसा एनवायरनमेंट मिल जाए जहां पे मैं app.jar को रन कर सकूं, that's all I want, right? That's all I want. I don't want anything else other than a capability or environment where I could run my app.jar for my application. So मेरा application कहाँ पे है? app.jar में है. So 3 app.jar जनरेट हो रही हैं for each of my application. Appointment की भी अलग हो रही है, docker की अलग हो रही है, patient की अलग हो रही है. Good. This is what basically I need before I start with the deployment part. So now I have my application ready here. Fine. Now I come to my AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Okay. And from here, what I will do is I will click on create application. Here I will give the application uh, application name, etc., etc. What I should do actually is, let me show example of this one, because ये सारी application मैंने already deploy कर दी हैं. मैं फिर से deploy कर सकता हूँ, but let's use another API. Let's say employee Spring Boot API is my application. If I go here and I say run, let's see if this is running locally. So if I click on run here and I say localhost, I think this was 9000. So मैं अभी केवल टेस्ट कर रहा हूँ कि मेरी एप्लीकेशन चल रही है क्या लोकल, and it seems it's working. Okay. Okay, now it's working. If I go and see my get here, try it out, execute, yes, it's working. initdb कर देता हूँ, execute, get again. Yes, I have some things here. Fine, so my application is working. What I do not see as working is जो इसका home URL ना, यहाँ पे white label error page आता है. This is not what I want, because when I want to deploy something on an Elastic Beanstalk, I need to take care of 2 important things. One is home page पे जो health home page का जो result है वो return 200 करना चाहिए, नहीं तो Elastic Beanstalk उस application को up and running नहीं कर पाता है. Now why this is happening is because अगर मैं इसके endpoint पे जाऊंगा, if I go into endpoint of this, मेरे सारे गेट मैपिंग जो है एम्प्लॉय नेम इस टाइप से है. देयर इज नथिंग ऑन द रूट. अगर कोई सिंपल सर्वर पे ही जाएगा तो वहां पे कोई फॉल बैक प्लान ही नहीं है, वहां पे कोई रेस्पॉन्स ही नहीं देगी एपीआई. सो व्हाट आई नीड टू डू फर्स्ट इज आई नीड टू create a endpoint with the root folder, something like this. I say public void, and let's say I return something. Let's say I return a string, and I say health or maybe home. Okay, and I will return. Okay, okay. Use, and I'll say some message also. Use employee endpoint. Use employee endpoint to perform operations on this API. I can do more, but I think let's stick with this, only this much. Okay, now if I do this and let's say rerun it,